We should be able to hold two ideas at the same time, and just two ideas, that Israel has a right to exist, and at the same time that also that Palestine has a right to exist, that both Jews and Palestinians have a right to live freely, in security, in dignity. It's possible. You look at actions like starving the civilian population, it's hard to understand what could be the incentive for that, except to push the civilian population out, because it doesn't help in the actual war against Hamas. It doesn't weaken Hamas when you starve the civilian population.
Yuval Noah Harari, who you'll of course know from his many books, including his most recent one, Nexus. Yuval, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for the invitation.
No, not at all. Can we just start with where we are on Israel and on Gaza? In the last 24 hours, we've seen a really extraordinary thing that doesn't happen very often. We've seen the US government, the Trump administration, condemn the British government for its actions in terms of sanctioning two senior Israeli government ministers. Can you remember a time when Israel was more friendless and alone in the world?
A lot of the bullies of the world are actually friendly with Israel, like you just mentioned, President Trump. And I can't remember a time when Israel has been doing such things. There is a distinct possibility. I mean, we've heard people within the coalition, within the ruling Israeli coalition, openly talking about plans for ethnic cleansing, for driving the civilian population out of Gaza, for annexing this territory or part of it to Israel. So these are definitely unprecedented times.
Do you think what the British government has done in terms of sanctioning Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, is it important? Is it performative? Is it both?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have the kind of expertise to know whether these kinds of specific sanctions will work or not.
I suppose what I'm interested in is around, particularly in Europe, European governments are repeatedly saying that what Israel is doing is unacceptable. It's intolerable. Indeed, going as far as saying that it's appalling. Our foreign secretary has said that. And yet we are tolerating it. We are accepting it. So is this just a case of us performing because that's what we expect?
You know, it's part of a much wider process that we see all over the world, which is the collapse of the liberal global order that has been in place for decades. The biggest taboo of I mean, we all know the order had many problems and many violations, but there was one big taboo which was maintained for decades, which was that you cannot just invade and conquer another country, another land, because you're stronger. This was the biggest taboo of the system. This is now being broken all over the world, most clearly by Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. But the Israelis are seeing it, and they are saying if the Russians can just invade and annex Donbass or maybe the whole of Ukraine, why can't we invade and annex Gaza or territories in Syria?
You think
that's
what they want to do? They want to annex Gaza, remove the population?
Again, it's not what I'm saying. There are several members of the current coalition in Israel who have repeatedly and openly said that this is their intentions. And most importantly, I think the Israeli government has failed to present to the world a clear alternative. What are the war aims of Israel, if not that? They didn't say clearly that, okay, we want to destroy Hamas and then retreat and have some kind of Palestinian authority. No. There is a lot of confusion from some of the coalition members, whereas others very clearly say that this is what they want. And you look at actions like starving the civilian population, it's hard to understand what could be the incentive for that, except to push the civilian population out, because it doesn't help in the actual war against Hamas. It doesn't weaken Hamas when you starve the civilian population. So it seems, both from the declarations of some coalition members and from the actual actions of Israel, that this is the intention.
When Israel gets criticised by governments around the world, by people around the world for its actions, its knee-jerk response is to shout anti-Semitism quite often. I mean, obviously they will tell you that they don't want terrorists on the border and that they have to destroy Hamas, and that is globally understood. But when you hear that sort of cry of anti-Semitism, that people don't understand what Israel's doing because they are anti-Jew, I wonder what goes through your head.
It complicates it because there is real anti-Semitism. There are many people, again, going on record, saying that they want to completely destroy Israel, to expel the Jews from the land between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. This is not just in the imagination. This is a reality. And we do see also horrific attacks on Jews and Israelis in places like, in Washington, in Boulder, Colorado, simply because they are Jews or simply because they are Israelis. And this really complicates it.
And do you think that the actions of the Israeli government are exacerbating that?
To some extent, yes. But the Israeli government actually, it works in its favor when there is a rise in anti-Semitism, because it seems to justify, to some extent, its actions. It causes even Jews and Israelis who criticize the government, when they see these attacks, they are naturally inclined to just close ranks around the government. No matter how much they don't like it or what it's doing, when you're being attacked from outside, it causes you to close ranks.
I mean, it's really complicated. You mentioned the shooting in Washington and the firebombing in Colorado, horrific events, and yet the perpetrators were heard, I think, on both occasions shouting, "Free Palestine." Now, you can either respond to that by saying that's just terrorism. It's domestic terrorism, and you cannot treat it in any other way than as an anti-Semitic attack.
Absolutely.
Or you can say there is an underlying geopolitical argument for why these attacks are happening now, which is directly correlated to what Israel is doing.
But they are not justified and they are not helpful. I mean, you can be in favor of a free Palestine and at the same time accept the right of Israel to exist, and certainly accept the right of Jewish people in the United States to be alive. So these kinds of attacks are in no way a kind of logical extension.
And they're helping Israel.
And they're actually helping the Netanyahu government. They are not doing anything to undermine it. The most, it's really frustrating because, humans are such intelligent and complex entities. We have billions of neurons in our brain. We have tens or hundreds of billions of synapses in our brain. We should be able to hold two ideas at the same time, and just two ideas, that Israel has a right to exist, and at the same time that also that Palestine has a right to exist, that both Jews and Palestinians have a right to live freely, in security, in dignity. It's possible. And it's really frustrating that people can't hold these two ideas together, and they think that if they support Israel, it means they must be against the Palestinians. And if they support the Palestinians, it means they must be in favor of destroying Israel. It shouldn't be like that.
What about the word Zionism now? I mean, you've been very thoughtful on this in the past. Zionism is often used as an insult.
Yeah. It's a misunderstanding. I mean, the meaning of Zionism is very simple. Zionism says that Jews are not just individuals, there is also a Jewish people. And Zionism says that the Jewish people, like other people around the world, have a right to self-determination. These are the two basic things that Zionism says. If you accept these two things, that there is a Jewish people and it has a right to self-determination, you're a Zionist. Or at least you accept the basic principles of Zionism. Now, having accepted that, different peoples have very different ideas about how to realize the right of self-determination of the Jewish people. Some people think that the only way to realize it is by denying the right of self-determination of the Palestinians. But this is not a logical conclusion of that. There still are, many people who see themselves as Zionists, and I'm one amongst them, who think that you can realize the Jewish right for self-determination and at the same time also realize the Palestinian right for self-determination. These are not mutually exclusive.
Do you think we're further away from that than we've ever been?
Yeah. Ever been? I'm not sure. Definitely much further away than we were, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Do you think that Israel and I say Israelis here rather than Jews, Israelis as a nation, as a country,
Yeah.
do you think that as a country it has been desensitized to the violence which has taken place?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's not unique to Israel. Any country that goes through what Israel has been through in the last 2 years will probably be brutalized and desensitized by war. This is one of the worst outcomes of war. That very often wars breed more wars, more violence, worse violence, because at the beginning of a conflict, the killing of a single individual or of 10 individuals, it shocks people. After 2 years in which tens of thousands of people have been killed, in which hundreds of thousands have been driven from their home, you become desensitized. There are now daily incidents, both in Gaza but also in Israel, that would have been frontline news and would shock people 2 years ago. And today it's just, it happens every day.
Have we become, and this isn't just Israel now, have we moved into a space where we are becoming more desensitized to the use of force generally within societies? I mean, I'm thinking at the moment, of course, we're speaking on the day, 5th day of LA protests. We've got the United States president sending in the military, sending in the Marines, talking about the arrest of the governor. We've become desensitized to the use of force within democratic policies, not just Israel.
Well, I will make a difference. I mean, the US is in a different situation. It has not been in this kind of violent war for the last 2 years. And in the US, it's a very calculated move by Trump to gain more power for himself. The biggest problem of every democracy since ancient Greece is that in a democracy, you give power to a party or a person on condition that after a couple of years, they give power back and the people can make a different choice. The biggest problem for democracy has always been, what if you give power to somebody and then they don't want to give it back? Now they have the power. What if they use the power to stay in power, to destroy all the checks and balances?
Do you think this is about setting a precedent ahead of the midterm elections next year?
Absolutely. If you set the precedent that you can arrest governors, that you can use the military to intervene on US soil, then once people accept it, okay, this is now the way you do politics in the US, then it definitely doesn't bode well for 2026 and even more so for 2028.
You think he really might try and cancel the midterms?
Not cancel, but you don't even see Putin canceling elections. When strongmen really destroy the checks and balances on their power, they never cancel elections. What they do is they turn the elections into rituals confirming their popular mandate, their popular support. Putin doesn't need to cancel the elections.
So what would that mean in practice for Trump? What do you think he might do? Because there are more checks and balances which are still effective in the United States by comparison, obviously, to Putin's Russia.
Yes, of course. We are still just a couple of months into the presidency. We still have almost 2 years to go till November 26 and then another 2 years to November 28. I'm less familiar with the situation in the US, but I can tell you about an analogous situation in Israel, which might also be facing an election shortly. And in Israel, Netanyahu, for instance, can bar Arab politicians from participating in the elections, can say that left-wing politicians are traitors and they shouldn't run for the election. They don't even need to pass any laws. They can just do it by decrees. For instance, one of the persons sanctioned by the UK, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the Minister of National Security, basically Minister of Police, he has the authority on election day to say, you know what, I can't provide security in Arab towns and neighborhoods. I've been getting all these reports from the police. So we shut down the voting. So we shut down all the voting stations in Arab communities. Now, I definitely don't take away the voting rights of Arab citizens of Israel. They can just drive half an hour to an Israeli town, and under the watchful eyes of my policemen and policewomen, there they can vote. Yeah. Is this election rigging? I mean, who is going to stop it? That's the kind of playbook that once the checks and balances are not destroyed, but are weakened, we can see, certainly in Israel, potentially also in the US.
And what is amazing, I think, and you know, I'm not the first to say it, is you can see this. You can see it as a playbook. People see what's happening, and yet there is a slight powerlessness, it feels, to counter it. I mean, we're living in a world where we've never been smarter about the tricks of populist politics, and yet we've never been able to do less to counter what's actually happening.
It's difficult because it requires not just imagination, it requires to take actual action. Action in the sense not of liking something on Facebook, of, say, going to the street. And do it in a wise way. Because, for instance, the demonstrations right now in LA are probably playing right into Trump's hands. They are not helping in any significant way.
But is there any such thing as a wise protest on the streets of LA right now? I mean,
on the streets of LA, I'm not sure. It's it's a democrat. It's a blue city in a blue state. It doesn't really affect in any significant way the people that it tries to affect. It only plays into their hands by giving them the opportunity to pose as the defenders of laws and orders and so forth. So we need not just to take action, we need to take wise action. And this is not easy, but I would advise Americans, I mean, what the US is now facing have been faced before by the Hungarians, by people in Poland, by people in Israel, by people in Ukraine, in many other places, and learn from these experiences what works and what doesn't work and what you need to be most careful about.
Doesn't work in any of those places. I mean,
in Ukraine, they got rid. I mean, this is what prompted the initial Russian invasion. Yeah. You had a pro-Russian president who tried to destroy Ukrainian democracy and turn Ukraine basically into a puppet Russian state. And the Ukrainians rose in a successful resistance and got rid of him. And this is what prompted the initial Russian invasion in 2014. You saw in Poland, despite the recent setback in the elections, that they did manage to get the populist government out of power. In Israel, even though we've been far less successful, months of demonstrations in the street before October 7th were succeeded in blocking Netanyahu's attempt to destroy the democratic system. Then October 7th happened and, changed completely the situation. But
can I ask you about something completely different?
Yes,
something
please.
Perhaps a bit more uplifting, or maybe it's not more uplifting. Obviously, you came to most prominence with your book *Sapiens*, which is a book about about human evolution, about the development of the human mind, how we got to where we are. We obviously now we're in the foothills of the AI revolution. Do you think that if we were to create, which is what AI is driving for, if they were to create an artificial mind in the sense that we were to understand it, does that mark the end of our evolution as a species, do you think? Or is it certainly the end of our thinking? The way that our brains have developed? What do you think?
It would be a major transition, not just in human history, but in the evolution of life on Earth. It's not just about humans. For 4 billion years, what we saw on Earth was the evolution of organic life based on carbon, on organic biochemistry. And now, if we are able to create or trigger the creation of non-organic intelligence and potentially even a non-organic sentience, non-organic consciousness. This is an event with cosmic significance. Not just 4 billion years of organic life is now going to give way to a very different kind of non-organic evolutionary process. Just to give two aspects of it, which are very different. First of all, it's much, much faster. Yeah. Organic evolution is slow. Inorganic evolution, digital evolution is extremely fast. It took billions of years to get from the microorganisms that first dominated the ecosystem, again, billions of years ago, until you get to dinosaurs and mammals and humans. It takes more than 3 billion years. For AI evolution to cover a comparable development might take just a few decades. ChatGPT and all that, these are the amoebas of the AI world. We haven't seen anything. The AI revolution is like 10 years old. It's nothing. So the ChatGPT is the amoeba.
So
now, how would AI T-Rex look like? And we might encounter
They probably created
AI,
one.
We might encounter AI T-Rex in 20 or 30 years, not in 3 billion years.
Let me ask you something. If you go back to, you've probably seen the film The Big Short.
Yeah,
wonderful
film,
the story about, the financial crash. And there's a scene where they get shown round houses in Miami.
Yeah.
And suddenly the penny drops. It sinks in. This is what the crash means for actual people. What do you think that moment will be for AI? Is there a moment you think will hit us when we suddenly say, okay, it's happened?
Interestingly, it can be exactly the same thing, just bigger. The financial crash of 2007-8, it began because a very small number of people invented very sophisticated financial devices called CDOs that almost nobody understood and were not regulated. And for a couple of years, it seemed to work well, and some people were making billions, and then everything crashed. Now, what happens if we now give AI, unregulated AI, increasing control of the financial system? The AIs come up with new financial devices that are mathematically too sophisticated for the human brain. And we have a couple of years in which these financial AIs are making billions and trillions, and then there is a big crash. And when the next crash comes, not a single human being on the planet understands what is happening, because the financial system has become far too complex for human brains, and the only entities that still understand finance and can tell you why the crash happens and what should be done about it are AIs. What does it mean to politics when no human president or prime minister understands finance anymore? So like these big decisions, you just have to believe what the AI is telling you.
And so when you said, because you used an interesting phrase, you said that carbon-based life would give way to artificial, inorganic life and consciousness. What does give way mean? Does give way, is there a sort of beneficial, sort of pleasant way of looking at that?
Or is
it will have enormous benefits. I mean, if you think about the crisis of the NHS, so there are not enough doctors. Think about a situation when you have millions of AI doctors.
But what does it mean to humankind when you're giving way, when you're basically outsourcing mental, cognitive development? Our development as a species, we're outsourcing it to something else. I mean, that is the end of something, isn't it?
It's the end of human history as we have known it for thousands of years.
That's quite big, Yuval.
No, for thousands of years, we lived in a human world in which all the decisions, the key decisions, are made by humans, and all the big ideas, whether of finance or religion or politics, they are ideas
so
coming from the human mind.
So don't we just take ourselves out of existence at that point? I mean, isn't that the logical conclusion?
We're plugging ourselves into the machine, the pleasure machine. And
it will be more, at least the transition period is much more complex, because you will have billions of human beings still making decisions and coming up with new ideas, but we will also have billions of AIs making a lot of decisions and coming up with a lot of new ideas, and we don't know how the interaction... Again, AI is not one big computer. We need to think about it as millions and even billions of digital agents everywhere, in the military, in the financial systems, in the churches, in the religions. We will have, AIs telling people what the Bible says, what Jewish religion says about this or that. Religions that are based on texts, they give authority to the text. Now, until today, no text could actually answer your questions because the texts couldn't talk. So you needed humans like rabbis and priests to tell you what the text is saying.
Interpreters.
Now, in a few years, you can have an AI rabbi which, unlike a human rabbi, no human rabbi is able to read and remember all the Jewish sacred texts because too many of them has been written over the last 2,000 years. AI is the first thing that can actually not just read, remember every word in every text written by every rabbi in the last 2,000 years. And it can talk back to you and answer your questions and also defend its explanations. So if you have a question, what does Judaism says about X? Increasingly, people could go to the AI rabbi. And if a human rabbi objects, no, you can't go to a machine, or it doesn't understand anything, the AI can have a debate with that human rabbi and can show the rabbi with sources from scripture.
We will never know if AI is telling us things that are fundamentally wrong. I mean, we can get the little things, we can correct numbers, we can correct dates, all the rest of it. But we're entering into a world where if AI tells you something and you think it's wrong, you might never be able to disprove that again.
Certainly if it takes over systems like finance, and then whatever the AI tells you about finance is the truth, in the sense that the AI is now running the financial system. So if it thinks that this is the truth of finance, then it is.
But isn't it also, just to take your rabbi analogy on, I mean, isn't the problem then that, as you say, in a way, it's very hard to compete with the AI rabbi.
Very
in fact,
difficult.
impossible. And everyone will confer upon it a certain legitimacy because it has all the knowledge. So then we as human beings basically decide to stop bother thinking. We stop bothering to even, because we'll just say, well, what's the point in us thinking about it? Because we can just ask the AI. And to me,
that's
for
extremely
all of the
dangerous.
advantages that AI clearly might offer, to me, that seems to be the real change and the real threat, that we basically just stop thinking as a species.
This is an immense threat. That no previous technology posed this threat, because all previous technologies we invented, they actually empowered us. They forced us
They helped
to
us
think. They helped us think. They forced us to think harder. Because when you invent an atom bomb, you are still the one that needs to decide what to do with it. But with an AI weapon, the AI can basically tell you, you don't need to think about anything. I will decide what to bomb. I will decide which next generation of weapons to produce. And
I can create another bomb, which can create another bomb, and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So, you one way to think about it, it's a very imperfect analogy, but I think it's an important analogy. You now see people in Europe, in the US, very worried about immigration. They are very worried about human immigrants. Why? There are three main reasons. They are worried that the immigrants will take our jobs, that the immigrants will come with new cultural ideas and will change our culture, and finally, that the immigrants may take over our politics, our political system. Now, and there are some valid reasons, some less valid reasons to be worried about it, but this is a very major issue. Now, I don't hear the far-right parties worried about the much bigger danger of digital immigrants, of AI immigrants. Because you can think about the AIs as basically a wave of millions and even billions of digital immigrants coming over. They don't need visas. They don't come in boats in the middle of the night. They come at the speed of light. They will take people's jobs. They will have very new and different ideas about culture. They may take over at least some parts of the political system, or at least the political decision-making process. In many ways, if you're worried about threats to the sovereignty of the country, about threats to the job market, to the culture, you should be far more worried about this wave of AI immigrants than about any wave of human immigrants.
I think I need to lie down now.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was the more uplifting section that we were hoping it might be, Yuval, but there we go.
Incredible, Yuval. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank
Thanks
you
for coming in.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.